Bookish Babes, and welcome to my book nook. For those that are new around here, my name's Rainy Barton. I teach music and I also love to read books, mainly thriller and horror, but I also read romance, sci-fi, fantasy, nonfiction, all those things. So if you're interested in that, please like and subscribe to my channel down below. It'll really help my channel grow. Today's video has already taken several hours to make, and we are making, in today, if you didn't see the title, we are basically giving you the stats on everything I read in 2022. And yes, I rented from the library every single book almost that I didn't have, so that I could take pictures and show you my stacks and all the things. So just know that it took me a million years to compile my data and then to take pictures and all this stuff. So this video probably took like 4 to 5 hours in the making, and it's going to take editing. I haven't counted editing, probably an hour. So, but I wanted to do this and we are doing it. So I'm going to talk about all my stats and everything that I read in 2022. So if you're interested in that stats type of data, this is going to be for you. So without any further explanation, let's just dive into the data. I have my laptop on my lap when I'm looking down so I don't forget any stats. Let's start with the typical Goodreads stats. So my year in books, as of now, I've read 32,690 pages and I've read 111 books. I know it says 108. However, I finished A Man Called Ove by Frederick Bachman today. I'm finishing Magic, Lies, and Deadly Pies tonight, and I finished Praise yesterday. So it's 111 books. The shortest book I read this year was Fall of the House of Usher by Edgar Allan Poe, coming in at 36 pages. And the longest book I read this year was Crescent City, House of Earth and Blood, which is 803 pages. And this book is mighty big in comparison to 36. My most popular shelved book was Twilight, of course. I was starting to do a Twilight reread, so that makes sense. My least popular shelved book was Monsters Are We, written by my friend Ren Montgomery, although it should be shelved after this video because you should all check it out. And then my average rating for the year was 4.1, and that's really awesome. You're gonna see when you see my stacks of all the books that I had a fantastic reading year. It was just fantastic. I had so much fun this year with my reading. Now I'm going to put up a chart so that we can look month to month to see how many books I read in each month, which months did better than others, and then I'm going to tell you which were my best reading months and worst reading months. So in January, I read 10 books. In February, I read 8. March was 11. April was 11. May was 12. June was 11. July was 14. August was 9, September was 7, October was 8, November was 3, and December was 7. So if you see, I started out pretty strong, and then the middle of the year is where I really hit my stride, and then things started to fizzle because I got pregnant, and that just is what it is. But as far as my best reading months go, I would say July and October were my best reading months, because in July I read 14 books and 7 of them were 5 stars, so 50% of my reads were 5 stars, and in October I read 8 books and 6 of them were 5 stars. So that's fantastic. That's 75%. And then my worst reading months would be August and November, because in August, I believe I read 9 books and only 3 were a 5 star, so about 30%. And then in November, I only read 3, but only 1 was a 5 star. And so that makes sense that that would be one of my worst reading months. Next, I'm going to post a picture that shows my top book of each month. So in January, my favorite book was Jade City by Fonda Lee. In February, it was Crescent City by Sarah J. Maas. In March, it was The Push by Ashley Audrain. In April, it was Verity by Colleen Hoover. In May, it was Other People's Clothes by Calla Henkel. In June, it was The Children on the Hill by Jennifer McMahon. In July, it was Blood Sugar by Sacha Rothschild. In August, it was Delilah Green Doesn't Care by Ashley Herring Blake. In September, it was Daisy Darker by Alice Feeney. In October, it was Weight of Blood by Tiffany D. Jackson. In November, it was A Flicker in the Dark by Stacey Willingham. And in December, it was Praise by Sarah Kate. And so I had a lot of great books, and there were books that made it onto the top book of the month, but they did not make it onto my top book of the year. But that's because I read multiple great books within a month, and sometimes they just happen to be all in the same month, so that just is what it is. Up next, we're going to show a picture of all my 5-star reads this year. Look at this beauty. This is a lot of books. I'm aware. It's a lot of books. But it is what it is. And then the next picture is with 4.5 stars included. I only had 5 4.5 star books, so I figured I'd add them because they were almost 5 stars, so they deserve to be in the same stack. So the most books I read this year. were 5 stars, which is what we would hope for. And then I have a picture of my 4-star reads. So here it is right here. This is all the books that made it into the 4-star range. Give or take, I'm missing probably like 3 or 4 from this stack. And then the next stack is my 3 stars on the top and then my 3.5 stars on the bottom. So I rated a lot more books 3.5 stars than I did 3 stars. There weren't that many. And as you see, we're getting less and less with the numbers, thank God. And then the next one is my 2-star stack and my 2.5 star stack. I only rated 1 book 2.5 stars and the rest were 2 stars. And then I do have a 1 star, but I let my mom borrow it for Christmas because I wanted it out of my sight. I actually said she could keep it, but I wish I had kept it for this video. But that was 9 Lives by Peter Swanson. And then this last stack is all the books I DNF'd this year, or at least 4 of like the 6 or 7 because I couldn't get access to the other 3 and I wasn't going to rebuy a book that I didn't even want to read. So that's what it is. And now I'm going to actually flip over to a video of me showing you the stacks side by side so that you can see them a little more in depth. So there's no easy way to show all of the books at once, so I'm just going to do this super quick. These are all the books that got 5 stars. Then we have our 4.5 star stack, our 4-star stack, our 3.5, 3-star, 2.5, 2-star, and DNF. And I did have a 1 star, and I let my mom borrow it, and I shouldn't have because I really wanted to have it here in the stack. But if you look, obviously, the 5-star stack is the biggest stack. And from 4-star and up, these are all the books that I loved this year. And then this to about here is all the books that were mediocre, like in the middle of the road. And then these were the ones didn't enjoy nearly as much. So I would say I have the least in, actually the least would be in the medium section. And then the section I hated the most. And then ta-da, a beautiful, beautiful section. If we break that down by data, then it means 49.5% of my reads were a 5-star, 5.5% were a 4.5 star, 20.2% were a 4-star, 9.5% were 3.5 star, 5.5% were 3 stars, 0.9% was 2.5 stars, and 8.3% was 2 stars. So that's pretty great. Like I said, 50% of my books were 5 stars, and I could not be happier with that piece of information. And now here comes a picture of my top 10 reads of the year. So in 10th place was Verity, in 9th place was The Last Housewife, in 8th place Hidden Pictures, in 7th place Delilah Green Doesn't Care, in 6th place Jar of Hearts, in 5th place The Push, in 4th place Jade City, in 3rd place The Children on the Hill, in 2nd place Blood Sugar, and in 1st place, of course, Other People's Clothes. These books were the creme de la creme. They were the best books that I read this year. I had a fantastic time with all of these books. And if we look at them, there were 7 thriller that made it to the top 10, 1 horror, 1 romance, and 1 fantasy. So thriller is definitely my favorite genre, and we're about to get to genres in just a minute, so you'll understand that correlates pretty well. Like, I read thriller the most, and thriller was my most enjoyed. As far as kinds of books, I read 36 books physically, which equals 31.6%. I had no audiobook for them. I read 6 with just the audiobook, so that's 5.1%. I read 67 with mixed media, meaning I listened to the audiobook and I was reading it at the same time for 61.5%. And then I read 2 by ebook as 1.7%. I really got into audiobooks this year. I had not really read a lot of audiobooks prior to this. In fact, I hadn't really read audiobooks at all until this year. And I've discovered that immersion reading is my favorite thing. Reading and also having the audiobook. Although also just having the audiobook in general is great because I can be cleaning my house and doing all these other things and still getting stuff done. So fantastic. And now here are a couple of fun author stats. So as far as for authors, 27.4% authors I've read from before, and 72.6% of my authors were brand new. So I read from only a couple of authors that I had read from before, but my primary amount of books that I read were from new authors. Because like I said, I hadn't really been reading a lot again. I started reading again a lot in last year, and so it makes sense that most of these authors are going to be new to me, but then next year it might not be the same because I've already read from a lot of these authors that I plan on picking up their books again. And then as far as for gender or who wrote it, 2.6% of them were written by multiple authors, so that's like Christina Lauren, and there's one other duo that I can't remember. I think, oh yeah, Sarah and Grace Pekkanen. 15.5% of my books that I read were written by men, 77.6% were written by women, and 2.6% were written by non-binary. So I definitely read the most from women. Power to the women. And as far as my person of color stats, I only read from 15.4% of my books by people of color, and 84.6% were not. And I am not happy with that stat. I'm not even a little happy with that stat. But you know, that is going to change for next year, friends. It's going to be the year where I read more diversely. So if we sum that up, it means I read from 99 authors in total this year. And the authors that I read from the most were Ali Hazelwood, because I read 4 books from her. I read The Love Hypothesis and her 3 feminist novellas that came out this year. I read from 3 books from Ashley Winstead. I read In My Dreams I Hold a Knife, her full book, I can't remember what it's called right now, and The Last Housewife. I read 3 from Jennifer Hillier this year. I read Creep, I read Jar of Hearts, and I read Things We Do in the Dark. I read 2 from Emily Henry. I read People We Meet on Vacation and Book Lovers. I read 2 from Deanna Raybourn. I read the beginning of the Veronica Speedwell series, which is called Curious Beginning and Killers of a Certain Age. I read 2 from Alice Oseman, her Heartstopper novel, graphic novels, books 1 and 2. I read 2 from S.T. Abbey, the first 2 books in the Mind F series. I read 2 from Karen Slaughter, Pretty Girls, and the prequel to that, Blonde Hair, Blue Eyes. I read 2 from Riley Sager, House Across the Lake and Survive the Night. I read 2 from Judith Sonnet, For the Sake of 1 and 2. I read 2 from Vonda Lee, Jade City and Jade War. I read 2 from Tessa Bailey, What Happened One Summer and Hook, Line, and Sinker. And I read 2 from Frederick Bachman, and Every Day the Road Home Gets Longer and Longer, and A Man Called Ove. As far as my new author favorites for this year, I would have to say Ashley Winstead, because I had never read anything from her before this year, and I gave her all 3 of her books 5 stars. Jennifer Hillier, I had never read anything from her until this year, and I gave 2 of her books 5 stars and 1 of her books 4 stars. Emily Henry got 2 straight 5 stars from me, so she is a new author of this year that I loved. Vonda Lee, of course, because I gave Jade City a 5 star and I gave Jade War a 4 star. Tessa Bailey, because I gave her It Happened One Summer duology both 5 stars. And then authors that I only read 1 book from, that I really enjoyed this year, was Sarah J. Maas with Crescent City, Ashley Audrain with The Push, Lucinda Berry with The Perfect Child, Geneva Rose with One of Us is Dead, Calla Henkel with Other People's Clothes, of course, Sasha Rothschild with Blood Sugar, Jennifer McMahon with The Children on the Hill, Lane Fargo with They Never Learn, and Ashley Herring Blake with Delilah Green Doesn't Care. But there were 4 authors that solidified their way into my top author slots. Like, these are the best authors I've read from. Of course, Ashley Winstead, because I gave The Last Housewife 5 stars, and In My Dreams I Hold a Knife 5 stars, and also Fool Me Once 5 stars, which I don't actually own. I plan on buying soon. And then Jennifer Hillier made it there with Jar of Hearts, which was a 5 star. Creep, which is the first in this duology, which was a 5 star. And then Things We Do in the Dark, her latest book, which was a 4 star. Taylor Jenkins Reid, because I've already read The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo, and it's one of my favorite books of all time. And I've read Malibu Rising, and that was a 4 star. Evelyn was a 5 star. Daisy Jones and the Six was a 5 star. So I just love Taylor Jenkins Reid so very much. And then Alice Feeney, I've only read 2 from her. Technically, I like to wait until I've read 3 books from an author, but I loved Rock, Paper, Scissors, and I also loved Alice Feeney. I mean, not Alice Feeney, Daisy Darker. So I'm just putting her here because I really enjoyed her as an author. Let's dive into genre. And I was going to organize my books by genre, but I forgot to do that, and it's too much work. So I'm just going to put up the stats for you. 38.5% of my books were thriller this year. That was my highest read one. Then we come in with romance at 19.7%. Then we come in with horror at 15.4%. So romance and horror were pretty neck and neck. Then we have mystery at 7.7%. Fantasy and contemporary fiction tied at 5.1%. Historical fiction, manga, and sci-fi tied at 1.7%. And then nonfiction was 0.9% because I read 1 book, and that was Know My Name by Chanel Miller. So as I said, thriller is mainly what I read, and then romance and horror are kind of tied. I like a little bit of mystery. I want to get way more into fantasy next year, so we'll see. But that makes sense for like the historical fiction and the manga and the sci-fi and the nonfiction, because those are ones I don't read quite as much as the others. Then let's talk about books in series that I started or finished. I've started 13 series, and that was the Wayward Children series by Shauna McGuire. I read the first one, Every Heart a Doorway. I technically started Twilight by Stephanie Meyer, but I've already read it before. So like that's my one reread of the year. But I did start it. I started Jade City this year, the Greenbone Saga series, and I read that one and also Jade War. I started Crescent City, The House of Earth and Blood. I started A Curious Beginning, the Veronica Speedwell series. I started Heartstopper. I read volumes 1 and 2. I started the Mind F series by S.T. Abbey. I read books 1 and 2. I started the Molly Southburn series by Tade Thompson. I started the Delilah Green series. There's going to be 3 books in that series by Ashley Herring Blake. I started the Creep Duology by Jennifer Hillier. I started the Lovelight Farms series by B.K. Borson. I started the Salacious Players Club series by Sarah Kate. And I started the Magic Lies and Deadly Pies series by Misha Pop. I continued on with one series, meaning I didn't start it this year, but I was continuing with it, and that was the Finlay Donovan Knocks 'Em Dead. That's the second book in the Finlay Donovan series, so I continued on with that series, and then I finished 3. One of them I finished up to date. So I read and finished It Happened One Summer and Hook, Line, and Sinker, which is the Bellinger Sisters duology by Tessa Bailey. I also finished the Steminist novellas by Ali Hazelwood. There were 3 of them, and I read them all this year. And then I also read and finished For the Sake of 1 and 2 by Judith Sonnet. There's going to be a 3rd one in the series, but I don't think there's a date for it yet, and so I call that completed because I've completed all that I can up to this point. I also made a goal for myself next year in my goal setting video that I was going to prioritize series a lot more, and I do mean that, so we'll see. Then let's check out the publication year. And we have 42.7% of the books that I read this year were written in 2022. I really prioritized new releases this year. 8.8% of them were from 2021, and then 48.5% of them were from before 2021. So actually, more than even the 2022 reads, I read books that were written way before 2021, which is actually pretty interesting. The oldest book I read was written in the 1920s by Edgar Allan Poe, Fall of the House of Usher. So, pretty fascinating. And as far as how I got them, 80% of them I owned, because I have to own every book that I read. I'm just crazy like that. 11% of them I got from the library. 3.5% of them I read solely via Libby Audio. 1.7% I got as an ARC on NetGalley, and then 1.7% were gifted to me. So I have a problem with buying too many books, and I know that. And is it going to change? No. Then I did a couple of readathons this year. I participated in Winterween, Summerween, and Weekendween, all hosted by Gabby Reads and Olivia Reads a Latte. Had a lot of fun with those. I also participated in Hallow Weekend, which was hosted by a bunch of people, like Lexi, Books with Lexi, Michelle's Library, a bunch of other people. And then I did my own readathon this year with my friend Reading Winiva, and we did a Hocus Pocus readathon in October. And those were really fun, but I'm definitely going to prioritize which readathons I'm doing next year, so I actually complete stuff. Oh, and I participated in Haley-ween. I forgot that one. As far as my favorite videos that I posted on my channel this year, one would be my Ashley Winstead vlog, and I've talked about it before because she literally watched it and commented on it and told me how cute my dog's Zelda was, and she actually watched it, and that was amazing to me. I would also say my new thriller and horror vlog that I did in July, because I read Children on the Hill in that one, which that was my 3rd favorite book of the year. I read One of Us is Dead by Geneva Rose. That was a 4.5 star. Loved that book. I read Hidden Pictures, which was one of my top 10 books of the year. But then I also read Hide by Kirsten White, and that was one of my worst books of the year. But I read 3 of my favorite books of the year, so I would call that vlog pretty successful. And then I really enjoyed my Haley-ween vlog that I did, because I got to actually vlog, be on the stream with her, for her live sprints. And I read For the Sake of, and I experienced my first extreme horror novel, and so that was really fun. And then I'm really proud of myself for doing Vlogmas, because I did not expect to be able to keep up with all 12 days, and I did it, and I'm so glad that I did it, and I'm definitely going to do it again next year. And then the last stat that I thought would be kind of fun is from Book of the Month. I get 3 books from Book of the Month every month, except for in December I got 4 because of this just thing that happened. Anyway, so that leaves me with a total of 37 new books that I acquired from Book of the Month this year, and I read 16 of them, which means I read 43% of them, which is better than I was expecting. However, if I'm going to bring those many books into my house in a year, I need to read more of them. So a huge goal of mine for next year is to read a lot more of my Book of the Month book selections. And with that, that is all of my stats for all of the things that I read in 2022. And it was a lot. And I'm just glad that we're done with this and that it's over and that we made it through. So if you enjoyed this, please comment down below. I would love to know how many books you read in 2022. How many did you rate that were 5 stars? If you know that information, let me know. If you enjoyed this video, also let me know so that I know to do it again for next year. Although I plan on doing it next year because I had a lot of fun with this video. But with that, I will see you in my last video, which is going to come out on New Year's Day to wrap up the 2022 reading year, and that will be my December wrap up. All right, I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye.